The date is July 24th, 2019, and in what feels like a Christmas morning, Sledgehammer Games drops presumably the last content update for World War II. They decide to tickle my taint and release not one, not two, but 7 brand new ways for me to huck bullets into the cheeks of my enemies. And along with that, they decided to lick everyone's balls who still play this game, and open up all past event collections. I mean, look at the selection of weapons I have to choose from. I feel like I'm on an episode of Supermarket Sweep where David Brykks told me I've got 30 seconds to find the best gun for 360 dick scopes. The date is July 9th, 2019, and over at Treyarch Studios, the group consensus is, hey, instead of delivering a nice wrapped Christmas present to our community, let's shit in their mouths again. Big stinky poops is what we do best here at Treyarch Studios, so why don't we stick with what we know and deliver the biggest piece of shit this game has ever seen. We'll shove another remake down their throat. We'll make a multiplayer map that's like a remake of a zombies map, and then our zombies map will be a remake of an already existing zombies map. It's the perfect plan. And to top it all off, make sure you go visit Grandma, because you're going to need to dip your hand in her VLT funds in order to have any chance at getting these weapons. And yeah, you guessed it, just like the maps, these weapons are remakes too. Not even remakes, just the exact same weapons you've used before. Fan favorites like the Argus. So let's do a little recap here. In World War II, I was able to get new guns and gear simply by shitting on kids. This was done by completing daily orders, weapon collections, or contracts. So basically any weapons that I really wanted, I could work towards and eventually get them, and not rely on luck. In Black Ops 4, Treyarch's system was a little bit more complicated. They said, alright, step 1, let's lure them in with some weapons and gear in the contraband system for each season. And then step 2, you can go fuck yourself, because we're not doing that anymore. This is Treyarch Studios. We don't take ideas from other CODs like War from World War II or customizable score streaks from Infinite or Advanced Warfare. You know, we have an image for what we want our games to be, and if you don't like our game, well, I've got a game you can play. It's called Go Play in Traffic. And if by some high-in-the-sky heavens miracle you survive that, why don't you just go home, go in your garage, make sure all the doors are shut, turn the car on, and just take a nap. Anyways, now we're in current time, and current times are a little scary. Things are ambiguous. We don't really know what to expect for Modern Warfare. We, the community, took a good railing over this last year, and people have a right to be worried. The concern is that this game will turn into another Black Ops 4 situation. A lot of people like to say that game was ruined by its pay-to-win system, but I don't necessarily agree with that. To me, that game was just rooted in an abundance of incompetence, the likes of which the COD world has never really seen before. You know, it then blossomed into a Category 5 shitstorm that was further fueled by its grossly capitalist business practices that continued to rail each and every poor consumer who laid a thumb on that game. With that being said, I'd personally like everyone to pull their pants from up around their ankles, because I do have hope for this next Call of Duty game, and I'd like them to realize that the work and effort that Infinity Ward has put towards this game hopefully will not be destroyed by Activision or Infinity Ward, as we will later discover in this video. But I've got a few pudding proofs to back up my claims, no matter how outrageous they may sound to you right now. So let's take a quick trip down memory lane. Let's start with Sledgehammer Games Advanced Warfare. This was kind of the first butthole probing Call of Duty tried on its consumers. Just to kind of see how tight that flesh was, we had weapon variants with altering stats behind supply drop. So this was the first case where you could dip into your college fund, take out some coins, and put it towards something that really matters. Next year, Treyarch releases Black Ops 3, and while a very good game in my opinion, they did much the same. We got brand new weapons that were locked behind supply drops. However, a big difference here was that these weapons were usually really fun and creative to use, or they were just straight up overpowered. So if you didn't have any of these weapons, you definitely felt left out. And then following that year, you had Infinity Ward's Infinite Warfare, which adapted a much different system than we had ever seen before. All Season Pass owners got access to the new weapons, and if you didn't have the Season Pass, you could do a challenge to get the weapons. Also, there was the salvage system where you could craft weapons that you really liked. A very consumer-friendly system, so that was the first 3 years of microtransactions. Two studios really screwed us over, and one gave us a very good system. So let's repeat that 3-year cycle. Sledgehammer Games comes out with World War II, and we already talked about this game, how very pro-friendly it was. And then Treyarch comes out with Black Ops 4 last year. Treyarch decides to double down on their shit and do exactly the same thing but worse. First of all, you don't get to make a shitty game with an even shittier microtransaction system. That is just a recipe for disaster. That's like when you're trying to feed the baby the healthy broccoli, but he won't eat it because it's broccoli and it tastes like piss. So instead you trick him with the piece of cake, but at the last minute you swoop in with the broccoli and the baby eats the broccoli. And instead of being happy that the baby ate the broccoli in the first place, you then proceed to wind up and punch the baby square in the jaw. And that pretty much sums up the Black Ops 4 experience. And now in our venture down memory lane, we have reached current time where we are awaiting Modern Warfare and how microtransactions will play out. So in this last 3-year cycle, admitting Modern Warfare because we don't know what to expect yet, Sledgehammer Games did a complete 180 and gave us one of the best microtransactions we've ever seen in Call of Duty. And Treyarch actually got worse, even though Black Ops 4 is objectively a much more terrible game. So that's my first glimmer of hope to you, that the past 6 years have seen all types of different microtransaction systems, implying that maybe it's not just up to Activision how microtransactions are employed in each game. We've seen a lot of variability, but I know what you're thinking, and before you continue, let me just stop you right there and bring you to Chapter 2 of Giving You Hope. Let's look at the total sales for each individual game. There's this misconception that popular Call of Duty games can get away with having a gross microtransaction system, so they're worried for Modern Warfare because it's going to be one of the most popular Call of Duty games. On the flip side, unpopular Call of Duty games typically have a more pro-consumer microtransaction system to make up for its lack of sales, but that just doesn't seem to be the case. Let's look at Black Ops 3 compared to Black Ops 4. Black Ops 3 was one of the best-selling Call of Duty games of all time, and Black Ops 4 was actually one of the worst-selling Call of Duty games. Yet they both had that terrible microtransaction system that made you want to scratch and claw your eyes out. Now let's look at Sledgehammer Games. You've got Advanced Warfare and World War II literally right beside each other in total unit sales. As we recalled, Advanced Warfare had a very shitty system, and World War II had the best system we've ever seen. Yet these games are right next to each other in terms of global units sold. Next, let's look at Infinity Ward's Infinite Warfare. Now we can't really compare this game to another Infinity Ward game because they've really only made one in the shitstorm of microtransactions that's plagued Call of Duty. But what we can do is we can compare it to the game right next to it, which is Black Ops 4. And probably surprisingly, these games sold basically the same number of copies, which is an eye-opener to us because we look back at Infinite Warfare and its microtransaction system, and we praise it, but we say, oh, that's because that game didn't sell anything. Well, Black Ops 4 is right beside it. Didn't sell many copies at all, and yet it has a complete polar opposite microtransaction system. So for those who are worried about Modern Warfare's popularity and its correlation between how they'll implement microtransaction system, history is showing us that there doesn't seem to be a pattern, once again implying that each individual game has an individual microtransaction system, with implementation maybe left up to the studio, not just on Activision. But why the discrepancies between each individual game? In 2002, Polygon writes this article, basically stating that Activision pays bonuses to its companies, whether it be Infinity Ward, Treyarch, or Sledgehammer, based on how their games do. Here it even reports just how much each of these studios were paid in bonuses based on the success of their games. So basically, depending on how well the games sell and how much money they accrue over the year, depending on just how greedy the developer is in this situation, will reflect just how much money they'll make themselves. So Treyarch's last few games where they've just been balls deep with microtransaction is surely because the people at Treyarch are making more money off of it, not just Activision. Now if you're still on this hope train with me, that concludes the factual evidence that I've been able to gather and present to you. But I have one more step to giving you hope, and while it doesn't involve any statistics or numbers, I think it's very important to consider what I'm about to tell you. For those who are maybe unaware, Infinity Ward has gathered a lot of its ex-employees to work on this game. Employees that worked on the Modern Warfare series and so forth. They've stripped these employees from their current jobs, whether it be Titanfall or Apex Legends, to come back and produce Modern Warfare. Now, a lot of these employees had left originally because of the lawsuit during Modern Warfare 2, where there was some discrepancies between who actually owned the Modern Warfare title. For Activision to then go out and seek these employees and bring them back to make Modern Warfare, it's a pretty ballsy move. And so I'm sure Activision had to do some cheek kissing to get a lot of these employees back. So with this in mind, I did some digging, and I must have dug really deep because I found some things that were really eye-opening and I've seen no one talk about. TGR has been a credible source for leaks regarding this game for the last few months, and deep down in his Twitter he had a tweet that, lo and below, kind of aligned with my suspicions. As seen here, the tweet clearly states that Activision and Infinity Ward have a contract for how they plan on handling post-launch content in this game. But the real meat and potatoes of this tweet is in the last sentence there, where it says, breachment of this clause would result in a Hell in the Cell cage match between two representatives of Infinity Ward and Activision. I mean, I'll be honest with you guys, I had my hunches, but this is pretty extreme. I did not expect to see something quite like this. I mean, if my interpretation is correct, if Activision tries to get all fucky, it looks like we're gonna have a Hell in the Cell match on our hands. And as crazy as this all seems, I think I discovered the roots of this holy shit, that guy just got sent to the Shadow Realm. I think I discovered the root of the contract, the real reason why this contract was written up. It looks like each company will have to put forth a fighter, and I did my research and I saw Mr. Mark Grigsby, lead animator at Infinity Ward. Let's pull up his Wikipedia because it has some telling information on this man. Mark Grigsby, look at that profile picture. Those eyes aren't lying, he's killed before and he'll gladly do it again. Further down we see his nickname, Dirty Mouth Griggs. Let me tell you, they don't call him Dirty Mouth for why you're thinking. The second thing you're thinking, yeah, that's exactly why they call him Dirty Mouth. And lastly, let's look down a little bit. They actually felt it was necessary to state whether or not this man was dead or alive. Now, I'm no detective, but anyone who has their status of their pulse listed must be living a bitchin' life of badassery. Enough with the jokes. Honestly, everything I've talked about in this video, and the true passion I see when these developers talk about this Modern Warfare game, I'm not worried at all for microtransactions. Will we see DLC weapons and loot crates? I mean, honestly, we probably will, just like every game in the last 6 years. But like we covered, World War II, Infinite Warfare, I believe there's going to be a lot of ways to get these guns, not just whipping out the credit card. But anyways, I gotta go. I think my dog's humping my couch cushions again.